is like a wild goose. Wanders all around everywhere, trembles and it shakes till every tree's loose. It rolls the meadows and it rolls the meadows. Take me down to your dance floor. I won't mind people when they stare. Paint a different color on your front.
I dream of soul country, of cosmic, what I call cosmic American music.
Want to scratch my itch, sweet Annie Ridge, and welcome me back to town.
You could touch a core in people. We call it high lonesome, and it's a certain melancholy, and it's sort of beautiful pain. But he had that to the max.
Truckers and the kickers and the cowboys.
Very little is really known about him, considering how much has been written about him. I mean, he was kind of a mysterious guy. It adds up to kind of a legend.
Any accolade I've been paid and any kind of acknowledgement of my success is an acknowledgement of Graham Parsons.
But that won't keep you warm at night.
If he had lived today, I think he would be a very big star.
Graham was rock and country. He bridged those two worlds. Just see him standing in the middle of these two worlds, you know, bringing them together, uniting them, you know. And that was his purpose.
He was very alive, you know, lovely guy. He just had this dark side and really sort of a death wish.
Graham considered himself the fallen angel. I said if Graham was here today, he'd still be dead. He was heading in that direction.
He was really a victim of the times. He wasn't doing anything anybody else wasn't doing. He just didn't have the constitution that it took to be a rock and roller. In that respect, he was definitely more the country boy.
It's a story that is so extraordinary. I mean, Graham's life and his death is something that might be in a movie, but you don't think of it actually happening in real life that way.
Our family background, even with slight pieces of truth in it, is an intense background.
It's a series of tragedies. It's like the Kennedy curse.
We're talking about a very classic Tennessee Williams play here, Southern money and alcoholism, and just a tragedy.
They were one of the pioneer families in Winter Haven. And they were probably the biggest citrus people in the world and probably the wealthiest. And so they were the royal family of Winter Haven with lots of money.
My grandmother's family were very powerful in Winter Haven. She had a lot of pull, and she was very friendly and outgoing, but she could push people around, and I think she did quite a bit of that in a nice way, but she still could get her way. Coondog's family, they're just a regular country family from Columbia, Tennessee. They hunted and fished. During the war, he was stationed in the South Pacific, and he was a bomber pilot on P-39s, and he flew over 50 combat missions. He was very changed by the war because he may have had post-traumatic stress disorder. And back then, they didn't diagnose that. They would have to find other reasons to get you to go home.
And there's a picture of Coondog in here, which was Graham's dad. He was married to Graham's mom. We called her Big Avis. And he was a war veteran. I think Graham got a lot of his storytelling from Coondog, because I hear he was quite a character, just a really great guy. They sent him to Georgia to build the fruit boxes. And so he went up there and ran the plant.
You know, when he was given this deal and sent up here, you know, this kind of place could drag you down after a few years. Then you got the Sniveleys on top of him and always letting him know they had the money, not him. He was always letting known that.
I think it was hard to work for his father-in-law, but I think he was just an unhappy person and couldn't deal with life.
He'd lots of times during the day, he would bring his son out there, Graham. Graham was a real knowledgeable fellow around there. He said, you know, one day I might own all this. I said, yeah. I said, that's why I'm treating you so good.
Coondog drank quite a bit and would have to go to a hospital to kind of dry out every once in a while. And they both had drinking problems. I don't know how that affected their relationship, but I know it did. They didn't really fight, but I don't know that they were real happy together. But he loved the children and he played with the children.
Lord, I ain't no stranger, ain't no stranger now. Lord, I ain't no stranger, ain't no stranger. I've been introduced to the Father and the Son, and I ain't no stranger.
You see the front stoop there? The front stoop is where Graham used to perform to the neighborhood kids. He would stand on the stoop, and I think he had Avis in his band too, sort of, and he frowned on the guitar and did Elvis imitations. This was after the City Auditorium event, I think. When Graham was 10 years old, it would have been 1957. Here was his first really rock and roll influence, was this building here, watching Elvis Presley. And he got to meet Elvis after the show, as history says. They say that it changed his life to the point the next day he was a different kid.
Coondog had taken my mother and Graham and my grandmother Avis to the train station to send them home to Winter Haven to have Christmas with her family. And that night, after he dropped them off at the train station, he went home and shot himself in the head. He committed suicide.
Further along with
He actually left a taped message, and the only thing that was left on it, according to my mother, was, "I love you, Graham."
understand why.
My mother was 7, and Graham was 12. They went back to Winter Haven and lived with my grandmother's family. Graham became part of my mother's support system. He replaced my mother's father as the male role in her life, and they became very, very close. He really stepped up and became her guidance and protector. It was a burden. It was a big burden for Graham to be the man of the family for both his mother and his sister.
Bob Parsons was from New Orleans, and he came to visit, and he met Avis Snively, and they fell in love and got married. All the Sniveleys never liked Bob because they felt that he had married Avis for her money. Graham was a lost kid, and then when Bob married Avis, Bob sort of took him under his wing, and I think a large part of his psychological success was because of Bob, and Graham just adored Bob.
He lived very comfortably on Graham's mother's money, but I think that he loved Graham and Avis and felt that they were his children, and he did adopt them, which is why they have his name.
They started living life a little faster than they used to. They weren't just a wealthy Southern family. They stopped driving, Oldsmobiles and started driving Jaguars.
Avis was really a hopeless alcoholic long before she died, and I don't think Bob knew how much she drank.
Bob did have a problem with alcohol, and at the same time complained because she was drinking too much. But he was drinking as well, but there were definitely blow-ups and fights over her drinking. And it became very scary for my mother, and I assume Graham as well, when the fights would occur.
He was used to nice things. And, you know, he always had better clothes than anybody else. Just hot clothes. Where did you get those clothes, Graham? And he was just always rather enigmatic about it. We were a meat and potatoes rock and roll band. Graham would sing whatever standards were accessible to someone who only knew a few chords, even back then. He knew what he wanted to do. He wanted to be a celebrity more than anything else, I think. Perhaps that had something to do with his privileged upbringing.
His stepdad and mom had bought him a club to perform in when he was 16, and that's something.
I am his sister. I was the child that his mother and Bob Parsons had. I was too little to remember the home in Winter Haven with all the musical equipment and the dairy down, but a lot of what they did was to promote Graham and his music. And we had, you know, the piano. We literally had what was called the music room downstairs, and the piano wasn't far from it. You know, that was all for Graham.
This photograph is of Graham in his sophomore year at Winter Haven High School, 1962. I have a couple of inscriptions from Graham. Perhaps someday we'll both find out what we want. If so, we can't help but get it. In the meantime, we must suck knowledge like cyanide from an old peach pet. See you in the playground of the stars. Until then, sound as ever, Graham. By this time, Graham was at a prep school called Bowles in Jacksonville.
He was a charismatic guy when we were kids. A lot of us knew that Graham was probably going to wind up having some kind of a career or some kind of success. He just exuded it, and he was driven. He sort of stuck out from the pack even then, you know.
Oh, he was so pretty. He wore his hair a little bit longer than boys did then. You know, perfect manners. I mean, and just so sure of himself. I mean, when he told me he was going to be a rock star, when he told me he was going to be like Elvis Presley, I saw no reason to disbelieve him.
He got me in a couple of fights. He was one of those characters that get in a room with or a bar room or somewhere and get some people riled up and then step back and watch the trouble start. He didn't mind playing with your mind and telling some lies maybe once in a while and things like that. I have recollection of him going off for weekends and doing shows when we were there. He was involved in a group called the Shilohs.
When he met us, he knew a lot of folk music. He loved Josh White. He loved Fred Neil. He loved Kingston Trio, all these groups like this. Graham, you could tell, had a different kind of upbringing. He said, "You're a musician." He said, "You don't have to worry about what other people think." He said, "You're different. You're different than they are." He said, "You can do a lot more with your hair. Grow your hair out. Don't have that short hair." And all of a sudden, there was no doubt we were going to make it. Miss Parsons drank, but she used to come whenever we'd play, if she was around. She was very supportive of Graham's career. She loved Graham very much. You could tell the love that she had for him.
The day she got ill and had to go into the hospital, they had taken her off of alcohol and she'd gone into convulsions. They just total cold turkey, and it almost killed her. The next day, she died. Her liver ceased to function. And it was after Bob had visited the hospital.
On his last visit, after he left the room, almost immediately, she died. And I think hence the rumor that circulated that Bob had done something to her. And I think that's pure fiction of the highest order.
Whatever relationship he had with Avis was, he wouldn't have killed her. I mean, he wouldn't have done that to basically their children he adopted.
September 26, Cambridge. Dear Avis, I am now officially a Harvard freshman. This school is really fantastic. I never dreamed that college could be so interesting. My advisor's name is Jet, Baptist minister. Don't get excited.
It was clear to me from the start that going to Harvard University wasn't the primary reason that Graham was there. Getting admitted to Harvard and coming to Cambridge got Graham out of the South and somewhere else, and put him in a position where he could pursue his real interest, which was music.
There must be something I can do. I gotta spend a little more time with you.
At the time I met him, during the summer of 1965, he was playing strictly folk music. We played some folk music, we played country music, and at that time I told him about Merle Haggard.
I got over you just long.
And he loved it. He couldn't believe it. He loved it. He said, this is great stuff.
Then today, I started loving you again.
I told him about these country singers, Buck Owens. He really liked Buck Owens.
And it starts a jumping every evening when the sun goes down.
That is really sort of essentially musically some of the primary and initial music ingredients that started the whole thing.
She always got a big smile on her face.
He would spend almost every evening at some time or another in my apartment right next door. He'd get very depressed, and he would come to my room and be especially worried about Avis, his younger sister, who was sort of all by herself down there in the South. And we spent a lot of time talking about that. And he was probably the real family that she had left.
November 8th, Cambridge. Dear Avis, I thought it time I finally got around to writing again. The best thing we can do is learn from the past and live our lives the right way. We will be real people, not sick or haunted by what life has done to us. We have the advantage of seeing definite examples of what can happen when people permit life to tangle them so badly that there is no escape. For us, there is time.
Sing me back home.
After my grandmother died, Bob married Bonnie, their babysitter, and the relationship started falling apart with Bob.
He was a philanderer. You know, he was guilty of a lot of things, but he wasn't guilty of neglecting Graham and Avis.
By the end of that semester, Graham had failed every course, primarily because he didn't go to any of them, or very seldom went to the classes. I recommended that Graham be dismissed, which I had to do, because he flunked everything.
Christmas time, 1965, we all left and went to different places for Christmas. Then we reconvened in New York City. He found a house for rent, a duplex house in the Bronx. This is where we started to rehearse and so on and so forth and played. Then at that time, Graham was so into country music, that's all he wanted to play. Now, the two other guys in the first International Submarine Band really wanted to play rhythm and blues. We recorded a song that Graham wrote called One Day Week, and that was released on Columbia Records as a single. Graham decided he'd go to California, and then he called from California and said he'd met this girl at David Crosby's house. And David Crosby was living with this girl, Nancy Lee Ross. And their eyes met, and it was instant love. And Graham sort of took Nancy from David, and they became lovers.
From what I understand, my mother was engaged to David Crosby, and she still to this day says that she loved him very, very much. And Dad came on the scene and walked up to her and said, I've been looking for you for a long time, and I'm taking you with me.
Graham said, well, I think we should move to California because there's a lot more happening there than it is here. And then the entire band drove to California, and we got the record deal with LHI Records for the International Submarine Band album, Safe at Home. We recorded 2 cuts during July, Blue Eyes and Luxury Liner, and then we finished the album in the latter part of November. And then Graham said, well, I want to, the band split.
But he was already shopping out with the Byrds, fitting in with them, playing their gigs with them by then. So I think that might have had something to do with making that decision.
I did run into this fella, Graham, at a bank in Beverly Hills. I was in line, and he comes in, just bubbly young kid, and I said, I know your name. I've heard about you. And we talked, and I said, we're looking for some other players in the Byrds right now. We're going to rehearse tonight. If you'd like to come down and sit in with us and see what happens. I started in the Byrds and as the shy bass player, and if anybody watches the old Byrds videos, I'm the guy in the back row next to Mike Clark, the drummer. Having come through 1965, and here was the 5 original Byrds and achieving monumental worldwide success and meeting the Beatles and et cetera, and going through all this. Graham came down, and what really clinched the deal for me was at the end of that rehearsal, he picks up a guitar and he starts singing, and I sang harmony to him, and I went, wow, I have a guy here who understands what this kind of music is. And so I sort of said to Roger McGuinn, I said, I think we should hire this guy. Graham came in with such a strong love of country music, and that's where we made the decision to go to Nashville and cut Sweetheart of the Rodeo.
100 years from this time, would anybody change?
Graham had some really good ones. 2 of his best songs, Hickory Wind, 100 Years From Now, 2 of the best songs I think he ever wrote. So, and he had so much enthusiasm that he got to the 2 old battle-weary veterans off their feet and give us a little boot in the rear. Through the Sweetheart of the Rodeo experience, it opened up so many people to what country music was or could be, and erased a lot of that negative stigma that a lot of people carried around about it.
I bought Sweetheart of the Rodeo. I took it home and went, hey, this is a country record. What's going on here?
Graham was quite a good performer then. Once again, he was focused, he was disciplined, he was working hard. He was adding a lot to what we were doing at that time. When we gave him free rein, Buddy, he took it. He took that free rein and wrote it right out there. So yes, as Roger said, we were hiring a keyboard player, but we got George Jones in a rhinestone suit. At a certain point, we felt maybe we should start reining this horse in because it's getting away from us. I think he was really climbing that ladder, and we were just one of the rungs in the ladder. He was going up.
Hey, Mr. Spaceman, won't you please take me along?
We got over to England to play with Graham and Doug Dillard on banjo. That's where we got close with Mick Jagger and Keith Richards.
And, Graham was one of those kind of guys, you meet him occasionally. You say, hey, I've known you forever. Yeah. And then you can only find out more about each other, but it was kind of like that immediately with him and me. And the important thing about that night, to me, the first night I met him, was that he starts to ask me about South Africa. It's where they were going on from London. They were going to play South Africa. And he says, but I don't know much about this.
We were assured we would be playing for mixed audiences, and we were very naive because that certainly wasn't going to happen. In 1968, apartheid was at its highest.
He says that they pay well. Yeah, but, and then I explained to him, oh, you mean just like Mississippi, huh? Well, it's segregation and the sanctions and all that. And that very night, he said, but I ain't going. Yeah, I mean, just like that. I think, well, that's a good, I just got you out the van, right? You were a member of the Byrds yesterday. Today you ain't got a gig because I told you.
So we're sitting in a hotel room in London, and Graham says, I'm not going to South Africa. We had 2 hours to go to Heathrow. And I was furious. Obviously, his tenure in the Byrds was over. We let him go, and we were not happy. And Roger McGuinn and I, the consummate professionals, we said, when we have a contract, we're going to go to South Africa. You know, we'll do this without you. And we did. However, the reason he did not go to South Africa was not based on a moral dilemma over racism. It was because he wanted to stay and hang out with Keith Richards.
And then I started to find out his incredible knowledge of music, country music specifically. You know, since we were obviously, we hooked right away as friends. The next thing being musicians, that we started to find out about what we knew about music, what we liked.
She's gone, gone, gone.
We had a great love for Lefty Frizzell, Felice and Boodle O'Brien, for the songwriting. We just a lot of times just like talk about songwriting and the construction and, you know, what a song's supposed to do and how to do it best.
I actually made peace with him. And in a matter of 2 months, we were friends again. We discussed things, and we were discussing future projects. That's when the Burrito Brothers was hatched.
I had been talking with Chris Etheridge about starting a group, and finally Chris Hillman came around and said, look, I'm sorry, I didn't want to go to South Africa either. It was the wrong thing to do, and I think I'll quit the Byrds and join you guys. I said, fine. 2 guys named Chris in the group, why not? And next thing we had to do was find a steel player, and we got a hold of Sneaky, and so we wound up with Michael Clark as a drummer.
Graham and I were living together in Reseda, California, sharing a house and seeking solace in each other's friendship, and then writing songs but launching this new band.
I think Chris was the best friend, male friend that Graham ever had, really, and they worked very well together. They were in great shape and having a good time. Boy, they wrote a lot of good songs during that time. Sin City, for instance, that's a brilliant song in my opinion.
Graham was sleeping, I woke up and I had this idea. This old town's filled with sin, it'll swallow you in. I got the first verse and most of the chorus. And then I said, Graham, get up. I got something here. And he got up, and we wrote that song in about 30 minutes. It actually wrote itself.
This old earthquake's gonna leave me in the poorhouse.
They had great material. They were charming. They looked wonderful. And they had this insane list of demands, you know, that Graham wanted, that had to do with trips to England and this, that, and the other, and limos. They wanted to have the full Beatles rock star treatment before they made a record.
Gilded Palace of Sin, we recorded at A&M, at the studios at A&M in Hollywood.
You can see it in her eyes. She's telling dirty lies. She's a devil in disguise.
We all hope that we can still be proud of something 30 years down the road. That's what you're trying to shoot for. And those songs certainly fit the bill on the Gilded Palace of Sin.
I didn't have contact with other steel players that had a fuzz tone. I've never heard anybody use it the same way. They probably going to say, well, we didn't want to.
Whenever you are looking for a dime, it's all right to call her, but
I think it produced some gems. I think that album is a wonderful album.
just wasting time. She's a devil in disguise. You can see.
Well, we was at a rehearsal one day when we was getting ready to do the album, and I told Graham that I had a couple of old melodies from back when I was growing up, and did he want to hear them? He said, yeah, so we went ahead and I played them for him, and we wrote the 2 songs that day, the Hot Burrito 1 and Hot Burrito 2, and then that night went to the studio and cut them.
You may be sweet and nice, but that won't keep you warm at night, 'cause I'm the one who showed you how
song probably he ever wrote was Hot Burrito 1, and his best vocal on record on any recording was Hot Burrito 1.
I don't know, he had kind of a soulful, almost help me voice. Like he had a voice that when he would sing, it was almost like he was asking for help or something. It's kind of hard to explain that, you know.
Nobody saw. Do you remember the way you cried?
But I know that he had a bunch of tragedies in his family, so I'm sure that was really hard on him, you know.
He could kind of close himself off to the situation and do his own thing, but I mean, it still bothered him, and it bothered him that my mother was there.
Well, I wouldn't call it a pleasure, but I did meet Bob Parsons, and that was Graham's stepfather. He comes to the door looking for Graham during the burritos, knocks on the door, and I was ready to call Central Casting because here's this guy with the most gaudy plaid sport coat on and white polished shoes. I thought he was going to sell me a Buick or something.
When their babysitter married Bob, they moved from Winter Haven to New Orleans. My mother was not happy about that whole situation. Somewhere inside him, Graham knew he couldn't help my mom, and she had to let him go.
Graham comes up with this brilliant idea, let's go get some nudie suits. And I went, yeah. I was aware of nudie. I've always wanted to wear one of those suits, and you know, and I mean, you can't wear them in bluegrass. You can't do that. But you can wear them in country music. If you plug in, you can wear a nudie suit. So I think after we made our record deal and we had a little advance money is when we jumped over to Lancashire Boulevard in North Hollywood and ordered our suits. Manuel Cuevas, who we all know as Manuel the tailor now, very famous. Manuel was Nudie's son-in-law, and he worked in Nudie's original store.
The idea of the suits was, since it was a takeoff from country music, and we talked for months working these ideas and how they wanted to look.
The best part of the ideas was we opted for our own individual little painting on each suit. Graham's suit, of course, is very famous. We all know that suit. It had every pharmaceutical item in the book on the sleeves in the way of pills and marijuana plants, and the two naked women up here was quite a good touch. On the back, he had a cross, almost like either a cross between a prison tattoo cross or a cholo cross, you know, a homeboy cross. But interesting stuff.
What he was transferring to me in the form of ideas for making the suit was the actual way that he wanted to die. From the flames to the cross, to the marijuana, to the pills, and to the girls.
We decided to take him out to the desert and do something kind of surreal with the nudie suits.
And it was a great idea, the cover. Barry Feinstein shot that. Tom Wilkes, who was head of the art department at A&M, and Tom and Barry, they did a wonderful job on that cover.
You know, it was just a mad afternoon of taking pictures that we thought were abstract because everybody was loaded.
Yeah, we were out there real early, and we got these gorgeous girls to be models, and it was very cold.
And we made the pictures. The girls were running around. It was more of a Fellini moment than an album cover.
And they look great anyway. They look funky and kind of country western and kind of rock, and I felt that look was great. They didn't really need the nudie suits.
Tom Wilkes wanted something with them with a Joshua tree behind them. He wanted to use that place as the Gilded Palace of Sin. They all liked it. Everybody there knew we were in the right place.
but there's an attitude on that cover. It's one of my favorite album covers ever.
This old earthquake's gonna leave me in the port.
The burrito stuff was, on the 31st floor. I know some of his songs were starting to really intrigue me.
On the 31st floor, a gold-plated door won't keep out the Lord's burning rain.
Well, the first time I heard about him, I saw him. That's what happened. The GTOs, my girl band, we were all girls, and we called Girls Together Outrageously. Frank Zappa produced, and we were really notorious in LA. And this guy comes down the aisle in a red nudie suit with yellow submarines on it. The most sparkly, and the most beautiful guy too. And Mercy and I, we stood up and went, "Who the fuck is that?" He was just this spangly hippie cowboy guy, and did not care that no one else except Porter Wagoner and George Jones were wearing these clothes, Well, sometimes Mercy and I, and maybe 6 or 8 other people, were the only people in the room. They were not a popular band.
They looked great, and they sounded horrific. They were just terrible. I thought, this is a band who it's all about image, and they never rehearse, clearly. I mean, they don't have a plan, they don't have harmonies at work. I mean, it just sounded like a train wreck.
And if you do a bad show and you got a rhinestone suit on, boy, getting off the stage is tough. You're shining like a, not good. But the heart was there, the spirit was there.
She's a devil in disguise, in disguise.
I remember them setting up, doing this little showcase, and then it's over, and the sort of polite applause, and then they have to carry their own equipment off stage and into a truck, and it was in their nudie suits. It was just sort of funny.
The most memorable Burritos show I saw was at the Whiskey, and Graham was doing She Once Lived Here, a George Jones song. And he was, I guess it's the bridge. I see her face in the cool of the evening. I hear her voice with each breeze loud and clear. Tears are coming down his face, singing this thing. And no one was noticing. And for me, it was my peak rock and roll moment. Not sitting on Jimmy Page's amp, not dancing in the Foxy Lady video. That was my peak moment.
He was erratic. I mean, his lifestyle meant that he was very inconsistent. I mean, Graham could be brilliant, very emotive, tear your heart out. Even if he wasn't singing in tune, he could still tear your heart out.
The thing about Graham was he wanted to make sure that everybody around him that he cared about understood this music, country music. It was a mission he was on, and he would take you into his world.
He mentioned some George Jones song, and I said, "God, I don't know that song." And he said, "Well, that's George Jones." And I went, "Who?"
Just because I ask a friend about her.
He had a little portable record player, and one after another, he played us all these albums. George Jones, Merle Haggard, Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson. We had no idea. There was no understanding. Everyone thought country music was lame and for old fogies and people in the South and the Midwest, unhip people. And it was light bulbs, because they were so brilliant.
Graham Parsons is the only guy I know that could make every chick in the audience weep, which is a rare quality.
I don't know what it was, but it seemed like everybody almost felt sorry for him, But the women really loved him, and loved the way he sang.
I remember being in Palomino Club in California, and hardened old peroxide waitresses who have been there for yonks, tears streaming down their eyes while they're listening to Graham play.
I'm your toy, I'm your
I hung out with Keith Richards for a while, and Keith and I had an affinity for country music. He really loved it. And we started playing it, and then finally he had to go to LA to mix Beggar's Banquet.
I was working for the Rolling Stones. That's how I got to know him. One of the first things he did was borrow $5 from me to buy a six-pack. And I said, I'm gonna like this guy. I like his, like his style. And then he called me and asked me if I would be his road manager, to which I replied, what's a road manager? And now I know.
We took our first tour to promote the Gilded Palace of Sin, and we took the train. And that was another one of Graham's ideas. Let's give him credit for that one.
Graham was a big train fan. The guys at the band were a little hesitant about flying. I think it was probably a lame excuse because they wanted to take the train.
Interesting idea, quite expensive, but a lot of fun.
That was that famous train tour. That was something else. And it was a hell of a trip, I'll just tell you that.
Lots of poker playing on that train, lots of mischief. Had those brand new nudie suits hanging up in the closet.
My job was primarily to get them on the train, hide the drugs, get them fed, get them to rehearse a little bit, and then hide the drugs. And there was a lot of card playing, a lot of cheating, a lot of drinking, a lot of me hiding the drugs, them trying to find the drugs.
Graham had like 200 Placidils or some kind of pill and some kind of cough syrup that was the strongest thing. I mean, it was unbelievable.
And he had this little bottle, and he said, let's do some mescaline.
It was like, I don't know how heavy, what it was, but it was, you take a swallow of the cough syrup and boom, you're out, you know.
So everybody took psychedelics on this train, and we were totally crazy.
Michael Vossi was the representative of A&M Records on the train tour, and Michael was more stoned than anybody.
The dining car was open, and of course we were voraciously hungry. And so we went into the dining car, and that could have been the explosive situation that could have cleared the whole deal, because we were definitely not fit to be with regular people, and regular people were sitting in that car.
They took one look at us at the train, and they decided that it'd be better if we had our own compartments, because they didn't, the way we were dressed for the late 60s was not conducive to the Amtrak's idea of what people should dress like on a train.
Some guy in the dining car, to this day, I think he's a brilliant tactician, came up to all of us and said, I know you gentlemen are in show business and you don't want to be bothered by people who want your autographs. I've got a private dining room for you. And moved us all into this little place where nobody could see or hear us. And it worked. You know, everybody bought into the, yeah, we're stars, but we also kind of deep down inside knew exactly what was going on, which is keep these crazies away from everybody else.
That stuck on my mind when she walked out on me.
That was kind of wild. We barely got through it. A lot of drinking. A lot of drinking.
It was like a Fellini movie. It was like a cowboy Fellini movie, travelogue.
I did have a sense that we were kind of in this timeless place at that point. And I wasn't high. That's the moment at which in my life I just came to the conclusion that this band is really so emblematic of what's good about America.
It was pretty much, just chaos. They had a lot of dollars and no sense. They just thought if they were at the party. And I think the music suffered for it eventually when we plugged in at our first gig and found out that, we were in deep doo-doo because everybody, they weren't prepared. The train tour ended, I think it was pretty much a train wreck. I think we flew home because I remember Graham and Michael Clark and Chris Etheridge, I got them on the plane, and I had to order 3 wheelchairs in LA when we landed for the boys who were, you know, air sick. Airhead would be more like it. And everybody, you know, pissed off and not talking to each other. And those that could still talk.
I'm sure there's some other memories on this particular train tour that I might have forgotten, but I remember leaving and I remember getting there.
As a footnote, though, we had the opportunity at the time to go play Woodstock, and we choose to take the train tour instead. Probably not a great career move for the Flying Burrito Brothers.
He had an income of, I don't know, $20,000 or $30,000 a year, I think, from the time he was 18 or so. At least he never had to really worry about money in that regard. And as I say, that was both freeing, and yet on the other hand, it meant he didn't have to struggle financially in terms of music the way some of the guys that he was playing with did.
That was when he was in the LA scene and doing drugs. My mother was put in a mental institute at Bob's insistence. And she was pregnant with me. I think she expected him to rescue her because he was all she had. All they had was each other. I mean, it was a cry for help. And Graham was in trouble himself. He was caught up in a bad scene out there with the drugs and the drinking and the music.
This old town's filled with sin. It'll swallow you in if you go.
I just saw him from behind. Oh, he was very charming and adorable and funny and sweet. We were very, very close right from the beginning. It's one of those love at first sight kind of things. Doesn't usually happen, but it did for us. At that point, I think he and Chris and some of the boys were already having problems. And I don't know what they were.
And I think that it's been said.
When Chris Etheridge left the Burritos for whatever reason, then they were trying to figure out what to do, I guess, and Hillman switched back to bass, which he'd done with the Byrds. So then they thought, well, let's get somebody else.
Well, Burrito Deluxe album, when we started that, so that's when Graham was starting to get nervous there, and he was ready to get moving. And Graham was spending a lot more time around the Stones whenever they'd come into town. And Graham was starting to wear some pretty interesting stuff on stage. He'd have a scarf, and he'd have one of his girlfriend's shirts on. And I used to say, this guy's starting to look like a cross between Dottie West and Mick Jagger here. And he's dancing around. What happened to my buddy here? He's gone. I'm losing him.
Chris was trying to keep everything together. He was kind of the stalwart guy holding it together, and he saw Graham as this flighty character at that point. He and Chris were sort of disintegrating a little bit at that point because of the Keith influence.
I love this picture. You can see how young they were.
Childhood living.
And how happy they were.
I always figured, you know, hey, he's just about the same. He's a little younger than me. I always figured, oh, he'll be around for ages. We can do loads of stuff. I mean, it's like, hey, we were only really just getting going.
They were just like two brothers being crazy together.
Graham was so proud of the Stones giving him that song to do. Because that was unusual. The Stones didn't just give songs to people.
Wild Horses I'd already written before I'd met Graham, because he says, is it all right if I cut it? And we heard, yeah.
The one thing I remember about trying to write the songs for Burrito Deluxe is that the songs weren't coming, you know? And mainly, Parsons was not really writing. He was in a real dry spell. And so they were sitting around the lot. They had to go to do another record, but they didn't have any creative juices.
We sort of lost that magic we had on Gilded Palace towards his last days in the Burritos. He would be going to these gigs we'd do in a limousine. I mean, these are $500 a night shows. We'd be piling in the car with our gear, and Graham would show up in a limousine. Graham came from a very wealthy family and had this ongoing trust fund, which is about $55,000 a year. And it's sort of like he had sort of been seduced by all of that without quite earning it yet.
The Rolling Stones free concert is going to be on tomorrow at the Altamont Speedway.
It wasn't so much that we were trying to push the Burritos. They had the very, good audience of their own, and but it seemed to be an appropriate place on the surface of it to put a lot of different kinds of bands together.
It was just total chaos, already weird, scattered vibe, and violence happening. So at some point, the Burritos got up and played, and we played our sort of da-da-da-da-da, sort of happier country music, and everybody got chilled out. It was great.
Well, I pulled out of Pittsburgh from a got my diesel wound up and she's running like never before. There's the speed trap ahead, all right.
I think they were probably the opening act, and they sounded pretty good, and I was real proud of him, like hometown boy makes good.
So, it was clear people were having a good time. It was good vibes, and I didn't experience anything strange around the stage while we played.
Graham up there, and he's a very gentle guy. He got very soothing effect on people, and he knew it. But I think, that was probably saved at least some other people's and other heads getting broken for the while. They left them alone. And Graham can do that. He had a very commanding presence.
And then things started to degenerate. The Hells Angels jumped up on the stage.
It was down in the back of the stage. There were people from the audience that were getting punched out and into fights and everything else, and it just turned into massive chaos.
I just thought, this is not going well.
After the Burritos played, Hillman and Sneaky, they left, walking. They walked out. Graham and myself and Michael Clark stayed. And we stayed. We spent a lot of time with the Stones in that little dinky trailer, which was sort of silly. It was just smoke-filled. After the Stones played, Graham ran off with them and got on the helicopter, and then Michael and I were the only Burritos left. When it was over, we weren't invited, So Graham just gets in the rush with all the followers on and the road crew, and they just rush him off to the helicopter. And then Michael and I are like, typical, let's fend for ourselves,
I guess the combination of this whole lifestyle and the kind of image these guys had, which appealed to Graham.
I would say that he was impressed by what could be done and saw possibilities that he hadn't thought of himself, and I'd say that he was developing it along there. I never saw him starstruck.
Graham was spending more time with the Rolling Stones than he was with his own career. In fact, Keith Richards at one time mentioned to him, he said, shouldn't you be at rehearsal? And he said, oh, it's all right, they can rehearse around me. Not really a good idea.
He was showing up late. He was not in the greatest shape, and I had to track him down to a Stones session, and I went into the studio and said, guys, I hate to bother you. I got a show tonight. Where's Graham? He's over in the corner. And I go over there and say, come on, we got a show. He says, oh.
Hillman took it personally, and rightfully so, because Graham was, wasn't holding up his end of the deal for the group.
Mick Jagger, the other professional in this business, comes over to him and says, Graham, you have a responsibility. You have a show to do tonight. Chris is here. Go with Chris. We're working. Anyway, I drag him out in the car. We go.
It was just falling apart anyway. And one day, The band just about had it with Graham Parsons at a club, and a fight took place.
And Graham shows up right 2 minutes before our showtime, not in good shape, drunk, stoned, and we start the first song, which was a fast shuffle, and Graham comes in and starts singing a ballad.
I mean, he was famous for that. We'd start a song in one key and one tempo, and he'd start singing a song in another key in 3/4 time.
It was like the Keystone Cops crashing into the wall. I mean, we had to, oh my God, he's in a ballad, stop, and we had to, and Mike keeps the time going on the cymbal. We slow way down, and here's Graham. He's like this slow motion, and I'm going, that's it.
Chris Hillman put his fist through Graham Parsons' guitar body. And Graham said, "Why'd you do that, Chris?"
And I'm steaming, and it's steam coming out of my ears, and so after the first set, we let him go.
Hillman just said, "Graham, you're fired." And Graham was like, "You can't fire me, you know, I'm Graham." And Hillman said, "Well, you're fired, goodbye."
I thought that Graham was happy that it happened, and that released him from the Flying Burrito Brothers.
Graham, in fact, asked me to go to France with him to hang out with the Stones. And I was like, well, but see, Graham had a trust fund and I didn't.
We were invited by Keith and Anita to come down and just hang out.
It was like a big feast with the children, the animals, the friends, the music, and of course, the drugs were around. When Graham came down, they were kind of playing and singing together all day long. And it was like the Everly Brothers revisited, you know.
There we are, you know. Show me that Everly Brothers song I don't know. Yeah, and tell me some more about Lefty Frizzell or the difference between Bakersfield and Nashville. And, yeah.
Well, it was some kind of a terrible couple, you know. When they were together, you could not get into their game, or you had to just to watch and to listen.
You know, I think Graham and Keith played together as much as he played on the record. Yeah, I don't know, it was really like they were making two records at one time, only one wasn't being recorded.
He was living in the house, we're sitting around playing all day. I'm writing 2 songs a day, and we record them in the evening. Yeah, in the background, you know, always, he was very intimately involved in it, let's put it that way, yeah.
When you are around those very famous people, you ask yourself sometimes, well, I'd love to be as popular as they are.
I think hanging around the Stones and seeing that kind of impact can have on an audience was definitely, you know, he was soaking it up. And he would be asking me about, you know, rock and roll. So it was a kind of two-way street.
All the things they could do together were done. And it ended exactly the same way as it started, like a strike.
It was difficult, it was tense, you know, just being around the Rolling Stones is huge. You know, there's the pressure, the insanity of it all.
Maybe Keith decided that it was time for Graham to get on with his own work. It's always very difficult to get away from a guy like Keith, you know. But you cannot just hang around people like the Rolling Stones all your life.
Still in touch, but I don't think I saw him. I can't remember seeing him after that. It was just like, well, you know, see you in a few weeks, or give us a call. It was one of those things. But I knew that he was once again, you know, cleaning up, and he wanted to get out of the dope thing, and I knew he loved Joshua Tree. So we knew he was there, and then we, you know, we said, well, let him do his thing, you know, and that was basically, that's where it tailed out. You know?
I'm very glad I didn't go, because he got into heroin. And had I gone, I certainly would not have ended up in the Eagles.
Take it easy, take it easy, or let the sound of your own wheels drive you crazy. Lighten up while you still can.
Yeah, I think there was some influence of Graham specifically on the Eagles. The 4 albums that I played on with the Eagles sort of, over that range, explored a lot of the same ground that Graham had explored.
Was $1,000 wedding?
Well, he called me up and asked me if I would come and perform his wedding.
The other day.
When Graham got married to Gretchen, they came to New Orleans.
Invitation sent. The young bride went away.
My dad was the only parental figure in Graham's life. His mother had died. His father committed suicide when he was very young.
It was odd that at this wedding, it was mostly friends of my parents.
I found the whole group at his wedding, to be honest with you, scary. I found the phrase sort of psychic vampires going through my head. I felt that a lot of these people were people who were just drawing off things.
I was about 2 years old, I think, and my mother went back for the wedding, and I think maybe they reconciled a little bit during that time. She was still hurt, I mean, and I think she came to realize that he was in a different place.
He was dressed a little oddly for most of the guests. He was kind of disengaged. He always had that kind of disengaged attitude.
I'm not sure why even he decided to have the wedding at his stepfather's house in New Orleans, because they did not get along very well.
It was a father seeing one road for his son and you know, Graham wanting to take a different road.
When we were doing Graham's first album, GP, he was living here with his wife. It's a little oasis right in the middle of the Sunset Strip in Hollywood. Graham wrote music here in the room, and he also, occasionally he'd sneak down the hall where they had a grand piano, and he could be heard in the evenings sometimes tinkling, writing, or just, it was his refuge, and it was a very comforting place for him.
My involvement is I'm sitting home one day and the telephone rings and it's Graham Parsons, who I hadn't seen in a year or even heard about. He said, "Do you think there's a deal here in town for me?"
I get a call from Graham. He said, "I got a deal." Ed Tickner, his manager, got him a deal with Warner Brothers, and he said, "We're going in the studio." And he was so excited, and I said, "Well, great, let's do it," you know.
Graham was looking for a female singer to sing with. Because on the lines of George Jones and Tammy Wynette, he hit the lottery jackpot when it came to finding Emmylou. I mean, it's actually Chris Hillman who told him about Emmylou.
I said, "There's a young lady up in Georgetown. You need to call her up and talk to her. She's great." And I had to convince him. I had to twist his arm to make that phone call, but he did. He called her from my room.
So when he called me up, you know, and said, "This is Graham Parsons," I kind of went, and he had to kind of tell me who he was.
I called her up, and she said, "Sure, come on down." And I met her at the train station, and she took me over to her house, and we sat in the kitchen, and I knew the first duet, I was thinking to myself, okay, well, let's see if she can cut it or not. And she just sang like a bird, you know, and I said, well, that's it. And I sang with her the rest of the night. and she just kept getting better and better.
The ashes in the morning.
He said, I'll call you, and I didn't really think he would. But over the next year, I would hear from either Graham or his manager, Eddie Tickner. They had to keep putting off the record because different things were happening. And finally, they decided to just go ahead on their own. So I got a ticket in the mail, and I just went out there. I had no idea. I didn't know what to expect. Didn't know what was going to happen.
The songs were good, great songs. And we just got a chance to really open up and just be ourselves.
They had laid down these great tracks, and Graham was unable to sing. He was drunk, he was slurring his words.
Graham was drinking a lot doing that recording. And so there were times when, you know, he was together and times when he wasn't. I hadn't done that much recording in my life, but I thought, if this is the way people make records, I don't get this. And I actually didn't believe that record was going to come out.
Eddie said, we can't continue like this. It's going to be an embarrassment to you. You're blowing your big chance here, kid. And Graham kind of saw the handwriting on the wall, or on the bottle, if you will. And he did. He pulled himself together. Didn't become totally sober, mind you, but he cut down, and we did the celebrating after the sessions, not before.
I just thought, well, I got my $500, and I went home and bought a guitar with it.
So record one got done.
Oh, my land is like a wild goose.
I know he called me. He was very excited about the album because he thought it was, you know, sort of just exactly what he had hoped to do and the kind of thing he wanted to do.
And then a few months later, I get a copy of this record in the mail and asking me if I want to go on the road. And I thought, why not?
Graham called a few old friends who called a few friends and put the Fallen Angels band together.
Ah, the Fallen Angels tour. Boy, they named that tour right. Everything fell apart. It started rehearsing in my home in Van Nuys, California, on Chandler Boulevard.
So I went out there, and we had the most disorganized rehearsals. It was like we never worked up a single song. I mean, we would play them, but there would never be a beginning or a middle or an end.
It's just like party time most of the time. We weren't serious enough about the rehearsals. It was just wild. Everyone was playing music and having a good time, but we weren't taking care of business.
And I'd never worked with a band before, so I thought there was some magical process by which people got on stage, and it all magically came together. I'd never been around people like this.
We had a big party. Warner Brothers threw a big party for us to go on the tour. We had a tour bus, the worst tour bus ever.
I think it was an old converted Greyhound bus, and they had painted it maroon. It had this huge eagle in front, and it said Graham Parsons and the Fallen Angels on the side.
Graham brought along Gretchen, and we left my house and went on our tour, and the tour was just disaster after disaster.
And we did our first gig, and we got fired because we couldn't even play one song from beginning to end. Meanwhile, I was just trying to learn my parts and running a tape recorder so that I could get my little bits so I could learn my harmony part, at least on the songs from the record that we were going to do.
I must say that Emmylou is a pushy chick. I mean, she made them all work.
He needed a keeper, and she did. She took care of him.
She just made them do it again and again and again and again. She was like a band leader.
And we're going to work up a beginning and an ending and a solo. And we had a rehearsal, and the next show, we got so many encores that we had to come back and start playing the show over again because we didn't have enough material.
Well, I did my best to bring her back to what she used to be. And I soon learned she loved those bright lights more than she loved me.
I saw it at Liberty Hall. I remember almost everything about that show. Graham was singing pretty well, and Emmy was singing great, and it was probably the beginning of my interest in a lot of country music that I had missed.
Was when he showed his claws.
For the first time, I really heard Graham's voice. I really heard it, and I don't know how to explain it any other way. And I just fell in love with his singing at that point.
The more I looked at her, she's got fantastic eye contact. She can sing anything that you're doing in perfect harmony as long as you look at her. You know, and if you raise your eyebrows, if you're going up on a note, she goes right up with you in perfect pitch. Man. She's beautiful.
I realized I was a part of something that was pretty extraordinary, but I also realized how extraordinary he was. And when Graham was together, there was just nothing like it, his presence on stage. He had this extraordinary command, this amazing charisma. And you just felt like all you had to do was just get up there and sing with him. You just knew that everything was going to be right. And that was like this amazing turning point for me, and I think for him.
I never asked them about, their personal relationship. I know all kinds of talk about that I've heard. But I know that musically, they just were soulmates.
He had an extraordinary effect on me. And I will always love him. He'll always be this dear, dear soul in my life that touched me so deeply.
I got the feeling that Gretchen was having a hard time dealing with Graham and the band. I sort of worried about their relationship early on. This thing between Emmy and Graham musically was so intense, and the band was so tight as a group at that point. And here's Gretchen, sort of like me, tagging along, but with no real claim on them. I mean, Gretchen has a husband there. I didn't, so it didn't affect me the same way psychologically.
We were cruising the West Indies, and we took a trip over Easter break. It was in the spring. More fighting that kind of went on between Bob and Graham and Gretchen at that point.
I think basically he was an evil man, and Graham loved him until he really kind of found out that he was sort of involved in his mother's death.
My dad was an alcoholic. I think it's pretty well documented that Avis was an alcoholic. And when Avis was in the hospital, it is reported that my father brought her alcohol and brought her the drink that caused her death.
And Graham and Gretchen left the vacation early. I didn't know why until later that it was because my father kicked them off the boat. And it was basically because he didn't want the influence of what they were doing, which was drugs, with me on the boat. And so he had them leave.
I don't think that Graham believed for a minute that Bob did anything to harm Avis.
In discussing this with other family members, I would never say that my father didn't bring her alcohol in the hospital, but I feel if he did, it was because she demanded it. And in the similar way that someone who's in a hospital dying of lung cancer will have their family sneak cigarettes into the hospital.
I don't know the whole story with the hospital, but I think they blamed Bob for their mother's death, and marrying their babysitter was kind of the nail in the coffin.
I don't know what happened. The man that raised me, I don't think killed his wife, so.
After his break with Bob, Graham was never the same. He just was not the same. His joy was gone.
And that was the last time I saw Graham. If shattered's the right word or not, I think it was definitely strained after that point. I truly I mean, there was phone conversations with Graham after that, but we didn't see him again.
He was on a pretty much of a destructive path by then. You know, it was really sad to see. And nothing I could do to change it. I tried, but really wasn't much I could do.
Hearts on fire. My love for you brought
Graham moved into Phil's house because he was having problems with Gretchen, his wife. Phil kept an eye on him.
So Graham stayed at my house, which was a fenced bastion with Great Danes running in the yard.
You guys know who Phil Kaufman is. Was, is. I don't think people change their spots so quickly. It wasn't a good place to be, especially for Graham. Really bad, bad place to be, surrounded by those people.
He needed badly someone to talk to, you know, and I just thought, well, I'm it. And then he started calling me, and he would call me, and he would talk. He'd talk about what it was like growing up in Waycross, and, you know, he'd talk about this and that. It became somewhat more than that, you know. It became, yes, somewhat more than that.
He loved it out there. That was a kind of spiritual place for him, I think.
It meant something to him, and it was a very beautiful place. It seemed to be a place he went to refuge.
Graham kept up a love for the place. There's just this vastness, and it's so quiet. It's like being on another planet.
It was, oftentimes he would sort of escape to there. Unfortunately, he escaped too far the last time, I guess. But
Phil and Graham heard from Joshua Tree that Clarence White got killed in an automobile accident.
Clarence was the great guitar player with the Byrds. Clarence was killed by a drunk driver after a show, loading his equipment out.
The greatest guitar player I ever heard in my entire life, without a doubt.
Graham and I went to his funeral, and we thought that Clarence would not have chosen that type of funeral if he had his choice.
How can you come to the funeral of a gifted, brilliant musician like Clarence White, who was killed by a drunk driver? How can you come to that funeral drunk? Graham did.
I remember at the graveside, Graham started singing further along, and some other people joined in.
We were standing there, and I remember Graham told Phil, and Bernie Ledden was standing there, and they just sang a song. And they were standing there, and Graham said, "Boy, if this ever happens to me, don't let them do this to me."
Graham decided that we didn't want that to happen to us. If anything should happen to us, that we would like to be taken out here to the peace and quiet of the Joshua Tree Desert.
I guess he was just using it as a figure of speech, but that was his last wishes. You know? It was, whoever thought, you know, that it would happen.
Want to scratch my itch, sweet Annie Ridge, and welcome me back to town.
The making of the second album, Graham had used the same musicians. He had hired Elvis's band. That's James Burton, and the guitar player, he had Elvis's drummer, Ronnie Tutt, on the session. He had Emery Gordy, the bass player for Elvis, and Al Perkins, a great pedal steel player. We did the mixing at the old Capitol Tower in L.A., Hollywood.
These guys don't only usually play for like Elvis or George Jones, you know what I mean? But they'd play for him.
He would want to talk about the songs, and he would sing a little bit, and he would ask everybody, how does it feel? I mean, everybody had a good communication with him, and he was really relaxed.
The music was excellent. He had a good selection of songs, and he had written some, and he had co-written some songs, and it was going very well. But, you know, then it was kind of like a flashback to the first album, but not as bad. He was hiding what he was doing. But whereas before he'd be more blatant in his drinking and his drugs, this time he was probably like, "You don't know what I'm doing." Wrong.
Hearts on fire. My love for you brought only misery.
You know, before then, I'd been kind of intrigued by what we were doing, and I love the fact that I seemed to be pretty good at it, but it was more about me. And at that moment, it became about him, and it became about the music and what we did together.
It's not how tricky your chords could be, but how much passion you put into your music. And you could hear passion.
Of being untrue and then goodbye. What could I do except to cry and moan? Lord, what have I done?
Well, with the Grievous Angel over, the album, Graham was very excited. He was getting ready. His career was on the move. The record company was happy with it. And we were getting ready for the tour. And Graham was going to go off to the desert. And that, you know, then we all know what happened after that.
Lots of times he didn't seem to be having a good time. And perhaps some of the drug use has to do with, I think, an underlying unhappiness and inability to connect with people very much in certain ways.
Looking back on it, I think it was just an up and down thing with him. He was addicted to drugs, he was addicted to pills, he was addicted, period.
He was gonna go out to Joshua Tree and dry out. This is really it. I said, this is it. You know, we've got to get rid of these people. You know, we have a life to look forward to. And he promised me and that's what he was going out desert to do.
My impression is that his life had calmed down considerably at that point. And, you know, this thing out in Joshua Tree is just really tragic.
If there is one day in my life I could take back, it would be that day.
We let him go down to Joshua Tree with a friend of his, Margaret, and Dale and her boyfriend, Michael Martin.
Well, I mean, you just drove down this 2-lane road, and finally there was like this little motel off to the side, and that was it. I mean, it just could have been any place.
Then I heard him tell.
He had come up here to celebrate the completion of his new album, Grievous Angel. Came up with a couple of friends. They were drinking and doing naughty things.
And he sort of slid back. Backsliding is what we call it. When you're a Southern Baptist, if you backslide into sin, you know. But he transgressed once, too many times.
You know, to see the light go out in somebody's eyes, well, that's not something I think belongs to be shared, if you understand.
He made that one fatal lapse. It's such a silly way to go, and he knows it.
You know, the bottom line is the boy died, and I watched him. You know, and I'll never get over it. And tell you the truth, it's not something I really think somebody should get over.
I saw him in the coroner's office. I did kiss him goodbye.
Because the phone rang at 3 o'clock in the morning, and my father was in the hospital. He was in beginning stages of cirrhosis of the liver. Bonnie was home with me, my stepmother. She was the one who told me. She got off the phone and told me that he was dead.
And believe it or not, I think I heard about it on the television, on the news. Nobody even called or anything.
My reaction was incredible sadness because, you know, another friend had, and a close friend had died from alcoholism and drug abuse, you know. And how sad and really just what a waste. I mean, 26 years old.
Won't you sing me back home with a song I used to hear? Make my old memories come alive and take me away and turn back the years. Sing me back home before I die.
I was sitting in my home in LA playing shoulda. You know, I should have been there. I should have taken care of him. I should have stayed with him. And Kathy, my girlfriend, said, you know, why don't you shut up, stop playing shoulda, and go do it or shut up.
I actually had a birthday party already planned that happened. And at the same time, a funeral was being planned.
My dad was in the hospital, left the hospital against doctor's orders.
Checked himself out and went to California to bring Graham home.
Which, of course, is the beginning of the Phil Kaufman story that people have found intriguing for years.
And then when I called the funeral home to find out where the body was, they said that the family had called and the body was being transported to Los Angeles Airport to be shipped home to New Orleans.
New Orleans was home. I mean, Graham had no real home. Where else would the family bring him but to New Orleans?
I mean, I think that Graham's family became his musician friends, the friends in his world of music. People like Phil, who just, I don't know, just adopted Graham, you know, in so many ways.
Bob Parsons wanted the body flown to New Orleans to establish a residency after death so that he could control the Snively estate. And I wasn't going to have that. Graham wouldn't have that.
Graham was still a resident of Florida. And whether Graham was buried in Florida or Texas or California or wherever, you know, you are a resident where you are, you know, legally domiciled. So where Graham was buried had no play on anything.
It was here at Los Angeles International Airport in 1973 that I came out with Michael Martin in a borrowed hearse to take our pal Graham Parsons out to Joshua Tree for his final resting place. There was very little security at the time, and I sort of imagined that not many people had stolen bodies. So when we got to the counter, I told the man that we had to fly the body by private plane out of Van Nuys Airport. He bought the story. I signed a hastily Jeremy Nobody.
I think what he actually signed was Mickey Mouse, but in his scrawl.
He used the name Gerald Nobody, signed the release of the body.
He had been drinking, and Michael had been drinking, and I'm sure they smelled like this brewery, but the guy believed him and released the body.
You know, who was going to claim Graham? You know, were they going to bury him near Phil Kaufman? You know, like, Was one of his friends gonna choose a resting site for him? You know, it's crazy.
Got the body loaded into the back of the hearse, pulled out, and we headed off for Joshua Tree to honor the pact that I had made with Graham.
I don't know the details of that other than my father left and came back, and on my birthday, after my birthday party, they told me that his body had been stolen from the airport. They didn't want to ruin my birthday, but they also wanted me to know because they knew it would be in the paper the next day.
They drove off, you know, up to the desert, stopping it at all the bars along the way, and, you know, and bought a 5-gallon can of gasoline.
We filled the hearse up with regular and filled the container up with high test. High test was for Graham. We didn't want him to ping.
That someone would take the body of my big brother that I thought was going to come home and take him and do such a horrible thing to him. You know, I didn't know back then any of his wishes or what he wanted. All I knew was that somebody had stolen the body.
We're driven from LAX with Graham in the back of the hearse. It's about 2 or 3 hour drive. We hit Joshua Tree, came up the National Monument, came up here in Joshua Tree, pulled up to right about here. Michael and I got out, we opened up the back of the hearse, and then we went to open the casket. We paid our last respects to him. I poured the 5 gallons of gasoline in the coffin on Graham, took out a match, said goodbye, Graham.
You don't just take a friend and pour gasoline on them and light a match. How do you do that? How does anyone with any morals, any heart, begin to make a pact with a friend like that? It's insane. You don't do it. You don't do it.
In the first place, it wasn't a proper cremation. It was a partial burning, you know. And they left him. I mean, that's what's so stupid. If you're going to cremate somebody, do a bit of research, you know, and like do it properly. But you know, don't like go leave him in the desert by the side of the road, half burned. I mean, that's not very cool.
After what happened, I obviously totally blamed him, and all the hate and anger that I had was placed on him for stealing his body and taking it away and burning it.
I've never had second thoughts. And people ask me if I had died, do I think Graham would have honored the wish? And I believe, yes, he would have. He would have hired someone to do it, but the job would have gotten done.
I understood it a little more after him explaining that to me. I accepted it. But I also felt like there would have been a better way to handle it than what he had done. And I never communicated to him the pain that he had caused. And that actually to this day, he still causes.
And it was over. He was gone. You know, after we sobered up and did the deed, you know, then the realization, you know, is, oh, he's gone. He's really gone. I mean, we've done this thing here in the desert. Now I'm home, but you know, that's over. Now you got to get on with your life, and I did. I lived happily ever after. I am living happily ever after.
I was a pallbearer at Graham's funeral. When they found the remains, there were about 35 pounds of him left, which Bob claimed and brought back to New Orleans and had him interred in that cemetery.
I think that New Orleans, the whole funeral and everything, I'm sure it devastated her. In Avis's writings, she says She thought she was going to die when Graham passed away. It was so painful for her.
Trembles and it shakes till every tree.
The cemetery is off of Airline Drive, perfectly normal kind of cemetery environment.
Take me down to your dance floor. I won't mind people when they stare.
There's so much bad press about Graham's graveside.
Your front door. And tomorrow we will.
My dad died of cirrhosis of the liver 2 years later, and my family, my sisters and I, were not ever in a position of thinking that we're going to go to Graham's grave and we're going to do a proper monument to it. And I know the story of Phil Kaufman, that Graham wanted to be cremated and his ashes strewn in Joshua Tree. Then why would his graveside be such an issue today?
People should know his music. That should be his legacy, not the way he died.
He didn't touch any of those things that make monster sellers out of your records, but he did have a vision of going somewhere that no one else has gone before.
I remember Graham, and I want to remember only the good parts of him and the early days. That's what I remember. A focused, disciplined guy.
He had a profound respect for the tenets of American culture that gave us country music. I think he understood that.
He changed it, and the guy never had a hit record.
I wish Graham would have had a chance to live a little longer and record some more. That's what I'll say.
Graham's career goal was to die young and become a legend. He'll always be 26.
I don't think he had any sense of an ending. In fact, on the contrary, I think at that time it was almost like a new beginning because things were going so well.
You know, and there isn't a better exit than, you know, the early young death while you're still beautiful, and then the strange afterlife with the corpse being dragged into the desert.
Graham can never die. Like, Graham can never be at peace. It can't rest because people won't let him die.
You know, that kind of haunts me. How they seem to like to celebrate his life on the anniversary of his death, and I relive it each time they do.
And tomorrow we will still be there. Take me down to your dance floor. I won't mind the people when they stare. Paint a different color on your front door. And tomorrow we may still be there. Want to scratch my itch, sweet Annie Ridge, and welcome me back to town. Come out on your porch or step into your parlor, and I'll tell you how it all went down. Out with the truckers and the kickers and the cowboy angels. saloon in every single town. Oh, and I remembered something you once told me, and I'll be damned if it did not come true. 20,000 roads I went down, 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 and they all led me straight back home to you. 'Cause I headed west to grow up with the country, across those prairies with those waves of grain. And I saw my devil, and I saw my deep blue sea, and I thought about a calico bonnet from Cheyenne to Tennessee. We flew straight across that river bridge last night @2. Switchman waved his lantern goodbye today as we went rolling through. All the billboards and truck stops passed by the grievous angel. And now I think I know just what I have to do. Pick it for me, James. And the man on the radio won't leave me alone. He wants to take my money for something that I've never been shown. And I saw my devil, and I saw my deep blue sea, and I thought about a calico bonnet from Cheyenne to Tennessee. Oh, but I remembered something you once told me, and I'll be damned if it did not come true.